joining me now is the Minister in the Presidency, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni. Minister, good afternoon to you and thank you for your time. I know you've all been very busy. Everyone's been awake all hours of the day. In a way, this must be seen as, I think, for the moment, a victory for South Africa. This has happened here. Brics has been expanded. We've had a lot of praise already from various heads of state for President Ramaphosa and for the way this has been managed. How are you feeling after everything that's happened?
We are quite elated about the declaration, what was achieved, but also for hosting a format that is a new format of getting the Global South to be part of Brics in particular. Africa has participated in large numbers. We are in the Africa Outreach Program now with the presidents of the whole in the whole continent almost as speaking and present here. We feel honored, but also our message about multilateralism and also fostering collaboration and also making sure the positions of the countries of the Global South and in Africa in particular are supported and the growth of Africa is supported in a way that is sustainable and there's development. We are quite happy with the effort, so we don't mind the sleepless nights.
What was happening in the background? Because it's very difficult for us to know. You've done very well in keeping us 2 floors away from everyone. But very difficult to know what was happening in terms of the negotiations. I mean, how did you decide these 6 countries, for example?
So remember, the principle of the expansion had to be agreed on first. Yeah. So the first achievement was agreeing on the principles of expansion and the criterion of the expansion, and therefore when you have done the criterion and when the principle is agreed, you then say what is the criterion and how does that unfold, the modalities. And then the countries, how they were decided, is the same principle of saying the countries that are willing to work in support and to achieve multilateralism, the countries that are supportive of the reform of the UN multilateral system is important, and just to bring inclusivity in terms of the representation, because our issue as South Africa in terms of the UN system is that it's not reformed to be inclusive. It doesn't represent all of us. We are not equals. But if you want to foster true multilateralism, there must be representation. Everyone must feel represented in one form or the other. So that's the basis of which this membership was decided now. The Ministers of Foreign Affairs and International Relations are going to work on the modalities of the partnerships to say what are the partner countries, how do we get them coming through to be partner countries, because you know of the 20 countries that applied, others said we want to be partners, others they said we want to join later, we're not yet ready, and that's the criteria they're going to work with. But we are quite happy with the progress, and that the Johannesburg II declaration it announces such major achievements over and above the other areas of collaboration and cooperation that were agreed to.
Do you think more countries could be admitted as early as the next summit in sort of a year, 2 years' time?
I would not want to throw a guess, but I know that in the next summit we may the leaders will consider the partnerships, what are the partner countries that are coming through. But from the 1st of January 2024, the 6 countries come through.
If I remember correctly, you actually gave a presentation about security issues. And there is quite a lot in the declaration about the fight against terrorism, about those concerns. Are you expecting the BRICS countries plus the new BRICS countries, are we calling it BRICS?
It's still BRICS. Okay. It's still BRICS now.
Are we expecting the BRICS countries to work more closely together on security issues? And this is quite complex and quite important all at the same time.
Yes, it's important that we work together on security issues, and the issues that we considered is not only counter-terrorism, it's cyber security, food security, electricity or energy security in our instance. We've considered and climate change impact, because they become important. So we have to work. It's not a question of if we're going to work closely. We have to work closely with each other, because even the nature of cybercrime, the nature of terrorism, it has become global. If we wake up one day, we may not have terrorism on our account, but we may find that we are harboring or we are hosting people in our country that are financing terrorism. And therefore it's important that we work closely together, more so for the stability of the African continent as well.
The fact that we will be working more closely together with these countries, so Russia, China, India, Argentina, etc., is that going to change any of the working relationships we have with regards to security around, say, the United States or whoever else?
Not at all. So, and this is what we have been clarifying, that the BRICS is not a replacement for our bilateral relationships with countries. And we have been clarifying that since forever, to say it doesn't replace anybody. It's a working relationship that we need to strengthen with this group of countries. We have other relationships as a nation. Our focus is on national interests of South Africa and South Africans and African interests in general. And therefore our relationship with the US, with the UK, with France, with the UN itself is not replaced. And BRICS is not a replacement of the United Nations.
It's not, but BRICS is clearly leading to reform. Antonio Guterres' statement that the world has changed, we need reform, the way that the world is governed must change. I mean, I think he might have said that before, but still for him to say it here is a strong statement. BRICS is completely united behind that. Do you believe that there's now going to be momentum to actually change how the United Nations works?
We've got new members. We're no longer just 5 countries. So we are from January we'll be 11 countries. So we'll get more voice to support the agenda of reform that South Africa in particular and Africa in general have been very vocal on it. We've been driving the issues of reform, whether it's at the WTO, the UN Security Council. We've been very vocal, and on this particular one, we are very clear and insistent on the reform of the Security Council, so that it can represent the aspirations of the world. It can represent the demographics of the world. You cannot exclude the largest populations of the world from sitting in the National Security Council. It doesn't make sense. And it's good that the Secretary General of the UN reiterates that statement here. It means that we've got an ally in terms of our agenda to reform the Security Council and the UN system in general to reflect true multilateralism.
For someone watching this, the most likely thing they're going to think about is how does it affect me? And if you look at what's happening in our country at the moment with inflation and food price inflation and load shedding, we know the impact this will have with load shedding. We've seen the agreement signed with China and all of that. But for things like food prices, you would like to think that this is going to see more development coming to our country, perhaps through the new development bank, more infrastructure spending, and in the end, a better life. Do you think that those mechanisms are beginning to come into place? Is that going to happen as a result of this?
Those mechanisms are beginning to come into place, and just for correction, we released the inflation rates. It's quite low.
Well, onions are still 55%.
No, but the impact, remember, the net effect will take a while to factor in, but there's been an improvement in our own economy. But in terms of this, remember, when you are in the group of nations of BRICS, the trading relations increase. Therefore, markets, for instance, China just announced the lifting of the ban on our beef export to China, which is significant on its own. Our ability to get funding from the new development bank, and if you remember, they've raised bonds using South African rands, which are going to be used to invest in infrastructure development here. So it means the more we develop, the more we implement projects, the more people get employment, the more opportunities for young people, but the more the prices will go down, because then the value of the rand also increases. But where we are, we think our trading partners, now you've got a team of 11 who will work every day to say, oh, why are you choosing that and not choosing one of our own? Because that's what a family does. We're a family of BRICS, and therefore our opportunities to trade with the UAE, with Saudi Arabia, with Iran, with Egypt, with Ethiopia, with Argentina, over and above our relationship, the increasing of the trade relations with Brazil, for example, with China, with Russia, with India. It's just more beneficial to South Africans in terms of economic growth, but it's also in terms of being able to tap into expertise in other countries, and in our ability to send South Africans for exchanges, our abilities to cooperate in terms of technical expertise exchanges, our companies investing in their countries, and their countries' businesses investing in South Africa.
Don't mention chicken to Brazil. Okay, I think we can probably there was a very interesting quote today, and I think people are going to be looking at this quote for a long time. It came from the Russian President Vladimir Putin. He said, "I would like to point out that President Ramaphosa showed unique political mastery as we negotiated all the issues, even the BRICS expansion." How do you read that? You work for him.
I think I've had the advantage of knowing him when I was still very young. And
Putin or Ramaphosa?
Ramaphosa, my own president. And so the mastery every day, because I live under his shadow. Every day I have the privilege of sitting in meetings where he articulates. Every day I'm not I'm not shocked or surprised. I'm just in awe of the men and all of you. When we started, even the initiatives when we were doing to bring the peace initiative in the Ukraine-Russia, you never believed us. And when we started to say this is the progress, this is the children issues are being resolved, the prisoners of war issues are being resolved, other areas we're working on collaborating, you never believed us. And here it is, the world is confirming to you. The largest economies are confirming to you. The UN Secretary General is confirming to you that we've got a good leader in President Ramaphosa, and that he is for not only for global peace, but for the best interest of this country.
Minister Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, a minister in the presidency, may I say a very loyal minister in the presidency. Thank you very much indeed for your time. I really appreciate it.